cost of Medicaid has exploded. What is that doing to the rest of the budget? Because
yeah, the rest of the budget. When I entered the legislature back in 2003, the big concern we had was education and how much that was taking of the general fund, and how that was going to push everything else out. Well, the Medicaid budget has eclipsed the education budget in many ways. Now, it's a little more complicated because we get more federal aid from Medicaid. So overall, it's a bigger ticket item. As I said, it's almost $9 billion, and our general fund is, and some of that's federal and some of that's state. So on the state share, I think right now, is somewhere in the 3-point-something billion dollar range. But our general fund is only about 11 billion right now. Our overall budget, including all federal and everything else, and it's about $27 billion. But, out of that 27, $9 billion of that, 1/3 is now Medicaid. Now, everything the state goes through, all of the dollars, in every respect. And it's growing. And that's the dilemma, is it's continuing to grow. Medical costs, they continue to grow at a rate far beyond inflation rate. Put that on top of the growing population for Medicaid, and what you find is a train wreck. And here's there's sort of a question begging here, I think, and that is, so how do we get out of this? In my mind, what we have to do is we have to start putting the brakes on it. Once you get in there, you cannot just say, oh, we're not going to do this anymore. No, you've got 1.3 million people in Colorado who are now depending on this. I don't think you can tell them no overnight, but you can do this. You can say, okay, no more of this expansion population. Start backing it off and say, we will not continue to allow people to come onto the program at such generous income qualifications.
Well, can you do that within Medicaid expansion? Once you opt in, do you have that flexibility to?
Well, probably not by current federal law, but this is a place where I believe the states need, if they jumped down that hole, if they don't have to, they better not. But if they jump down that hole of Medicaid expansion, we've got to find a way out of it. And some in Washington say, let's just block grant Medicaid dollars to the state. I think that's a great idea. And I think the state then needs to start budgeting in terms of, okay, the block grant is this big, it's not going to grow, expect it to shrink. Because that's what really has to happen for us to just stay on top of all of our government expenditures, from the federal down to the state levels.
Barring significant regime change in Washington, is there anything Colorado can do, or anything any state can do once you go down the path of expanding?
We've
Medicaid?
got to push against it, and you talked about the regime change at the federal level. Well, I think we've got some already. We've got a Congress that does want to do the right thing, but we don't have a presidency, president who will. That's going to change a year from now. I don't know who's going to be in charge. I pray that it'll be a guy who will say, let's stop this train. At which point, yes, we can make that difference. And we've got to be prepared for that today. We can't think, okay, well, the other guys have been in charge, so let's just play their game. No, we've got to look for good government policies that go the right direction, and when the feds say don't do this, you've got to go our bad direction. We've got to just go kicking and screaming and doing everything we can to stop the madness and to start putting some sense back into the nonsense.
And if Washington doesn't change course, what is the thing you fear most?
Well, here in Colorado, as in most states, we have to balance the budget every year. So we will have to deal with this problem once it becomes completely uncontrollable. We will have to pull it back when we have no dollars to do anything but that. Now, that's going to be extremely painful. and pretty gruesome process, as opposed to today saying, hey, let's start to back away. Let's start to put this more under control. This is one frustration I have with government overall is we're always spending beyond our means rather than a little bit under our means. If we would just take that more conservative view of let's spend a little bit less than what we have, put some aside for a rainy day, and then manage things, I'll tell you, there'd be so much opportunity to do the right thing as opposed to just being forced into this crisis mode always. But barring any better change, that's where we're going to be at.
So for any governors out there who may still see Medicaid expansion as possibly a solution or a way to save taxpayers' money, what do you think the greatest example Colorado has, or what message would you give those governors?
What I would say to any state that wants to, that's contemplating Medicaid expansion is, don't go there. It looks seductively interesting because there's some dollars coming in from the federal government, but it's loaded with a lot of chaos and an awful lot of risk that you're going to be stuck holding the bag at the end of the day. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's a risk. It's a probability. It's not just maybe. I believe it will occur. So it might be seen as a short-term fix to something, but it's not a long-term solution to anything. The real fix is to get a hold of the rest of your budget and create those targeted programs that really deal with the people who desperately need some help. But don't think you have to with this broad brush just paint everybody into that box, because it's not going to work well. Government just can't do that sort of work.
Going back to those state programs you mentioned that Medicaid wiped out, that's something Wyoming Governor Matt Mead is interested in doing. There are several state programs that fund indigent care for the mentally unstable, and the argument he's making, especially that because Wyoming has a budget crisis, that Medicaid federal dollars will come in with expansion and we can displace those programs.
Yeah.
Why is that not a good idea?
Well, as I said before, it's a short-term fix, but it's not a long-term solution. It sets you up for failure. If you've got some programs in place, then look at those as an opportunity to maybe refine them. Look at the rest of your budget too. Determine where the priorities really lie. I can tell you the federal government is not a reliable partner in these programs, and Medicaid doesn't really help the recipient as much as it looks like on paper, because as I said a long time ago, you may have the coverage, but the people are not going to get the actual medical care when they need it. They'll find themselves in long waiting lists and maybe inferior options even when they get there, because that's the reality of how it goes when you've got these dollars to, a limited number of dollars, which is always limited, to dole out. You look in terms of, okay, how can we stretch these? Well, when it comes to medical care, we can ration the care. We can put in place some systems that make people wait a little bit longer. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you die. Literally die, because my wife had an uncle who lived up in Canada under the Canadian system. He got lung cancer. They had him wait 6 weeks to get a CAT scan just to get a thorough analysis of where it was, and by that time they said, I'm sorry, it's gone too far. We have nothing for you. Die. And he did.
Is the reality of socialized medicine ever sink through to these people that there is a limited amount of funds available? And if you can't have a way to control costs, there will be waiting lists, there will be denial of care, there will be delays.
Well, it really does come down to, do you think socialized medicine is a good idea or not? Do you think this is the business of government or not? I believe that we do need to find some real substantive solutions to the medical billing system we have in this country. We actually have the finest medical care in the world in the United States, and Colorado in particular. But the billing and the, who pays what and how the payments are structured, et cetera, is nuts. So we do need to find some real solutions there, and I think they're out there too. Mm-hmm. There are some very responsible members of Congress. I would recommend a gentleman I know from Tennessee, Congressman Phil Rowe, who's also a medical doctor. He told me he got into Congress in order to help provide solutions. And he's, they've been on the outside trying to force the answer, but just a few months ago they rolled out some of their more free market options that they think are appropriate. Here's another one, medical cost sharing. This is actually an exemption to the individual mandate for Obamacare. It's faith-based medical cost sharing programs. Here in Colorado, there are about 30,000 people who are a part of those programs. It's not government. It's not even insurance. It's people banding together and saying, we will share our medical burdens. And they actually cost families less for comparable care to what an insurance package gives. It's things like that. It's letting doctors run their business as they see, rather than being always held hostage to what Medicare and Medicaid is forcing them into. It's letting new clinics pop up that aren't your traditional hospital, your ambulatory surgery centers, which provide an outpatient process that can eliminate some of the huge hospital costs. It's things like this that we need to look into and encourage to develop. Let me challenge you this one way. There's one medical procedure that, to my knowledge, has never been covered by much insurance, if at all, and it isn't a government mandated system, and that's LASIK eye surgery. Used to be stratospherically expensive, but because they were operating on the free market system, it's now become a very cost-effective system, and it works well. A lot of people enjoy that. And if the government had been in charge of it, instead of it being $5,000 an eye, it'd be $50,000 an eye. We need to see these examples of where things do work and go after that, rather than this one-size-fits-all single-payer scenario that really Medicaid expansion and Obamacare and all those other things are headed towards.
You've mentioned quite a few good ideas. Let's say you were the Emperor of Colorado, and you were separate from the federal government, and you could design Medicaid in any way you wanted in the way you've described. What would that look like if you could design the perfect one?
Okay, first off, I don't want to be Emperor of Colorado. I kind of like our constitutional republic. But if I had that latitude for that one system to be put in place, I would ensure that there's a very limited safety net that would be available to any citizen, and that there be the emergency facilities available for anyone who needed it right now. I think those are some appropriate things for really the rich society we do live within. But beyond that, I would open it up to the free market. I would let individual doctors figure out how to conduct their business as best as they see. I would allow as much competition to occur within the insurance industry. I wouldn't restrict it to the boundaries of the state of Colorado. I would say, if you can get a better insurance package in Nebraska, go for it. I would open up the possibilities and the choices for individuals. I would also do this other thing, and that is, and I do this as a matter of policy, is I expand scope of practice for medical professionals. I try to make sure that there are as many options available for the citizen, and that the professional who is good in, let's say a chiropractor is good in an area. Well, I want to always give them more latitude to serve their patients in the best way they see possible. Now, if somebody is irresponsible, that's what we have the courts for, and that's what we have criminal law set for it, if there's a near doer in there. But we need to give citizens the right and the responsibility to conduct their lives as they see best.